She paid for a stranger's food at camp, not knowing that quiet act would lead to the love story of a lifetime. Kamsi, a heartbroken heiress trying to heal, meets Elijah, a reserved young man with a painful past. What begins as silent glances turns into a romance so powerful, even his mother tried to stop it. But when truth, grace, and love collide, everything changes. Who is Kamsi really, and why did her story take the internet by storm? Stick around to find out. You won't believe how it ends. Where are you watching from? Comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable stories. 3 weeks before NYSC, Kamsi Okoye sat across from her boyfriend of 2 years at a quiet rooftop cafe near her university. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting everything in a warm amber glow, but there was no warmth in his eyes. She knew something was wrong the moment he refused to meet her gaze, stirring his cappuccino like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. Then, without warning, he said it. "I don't think we're working anymore." The words came out flat, almost rehearsed. "You deserve more," he added, eyes darting to the railing beside them. Just like that, the future Kamsi had pictured, wedding bells, Sunday brunches, babies with his smile, crumbled into dust between them. She waited for an explanation, a hesitation, something to show he cared. Nothing came. Just silence, thick and awkward, stretching between them like a wall. She stood up slowly, her chair scraping against the tiles, and walked out without another word, her world spinning silently inside her. By the time she reached the parking lot, her tears still hadn't fallen. Her eyes burned, but remained dry. That, somehow, made the pain worse. She slipped behind the wheel of one of her father's SUVs, a sleek black Range Rover, and drove home in silence, the music off, the city lights blurring past her. At home, her mother opened the door before she even knocked. "Kamsi?" she asked gently. Kamsi walked past her without speaking and climbed the stairs to her room. Her mother followed, trying to console her, offering warm tea and warmer words. Her father appeared minutes later, brows furrowed, already on his phone. "Do you want me to get you out of NYSC camp entirely?" he asked. "You know I can place you in any ministry office in Abuja or Lagos with one call." Kamsi shook her head slowly. Her voice, when it finally came, was steady. "No, Daddy, I want to go. I need to feel life for myself." Her father stared at her for a long moment, like he was seeing her for the first time. Then he nodded once and walked out, leaving the door gently ajar. 2 weeks later, Kamsi arrived at the NYSC camp in Cross River State, her luggage rolling behind her. Her chin lifted like a banner. Her heartbreak was still fresh, but her will was stronger. She had packed light in clothes, but heavy in resolve. From the very first moment her name was called during registration, heads turned. Kamsi was effortlessly striking. Tall, with deep brown skin that glowed under the tropical sun, wide, expressive eyes, and a presence that didn't need noise to command attention. Her fitted khaki NYSC uniform only emphasized her long legs and regal bearing. She didn't speak much that first day. She didn't need to. Her silence was its own language, one that whispered elegance and authority in the same breath. By the first evening, her name had already circulated across several platoons. Boys whispered about her under mango trees, some daring enough to approach her with offers of water, phone numbers scribbled on scraps of paper, and forced confidence masked as charm. Kamsi declined every advance with the same calm poise, polite but distant. She hadn't come here to be admired. She hadn't come here to heal. She had come to feel, whatever that meant. That night, during said training, as a droning speaker lectured on entrepreneurship and skill acquisition, Kamsi found her eyes drifting to the back row. That was when she saw him. Alone, slouched, not pretending to be interested like the others. His notebook was open, pen in hand, but he wasn't writing. He wasn't even listening. He just sat there, quietly observing, or perhaps retreating into himself. Something about him felt familiar. Not in a way that reminded her of someone else, but in the way that made her wonder if he'd ever been truly seen. Later that evening, Kamsi walked through the dimly lit Mommy Market, a cluster of food stalls, alive with smoke, laughter, and the clatter of aluminum pots. She stopped to order fried plantains and peppered chicken. While waiting, she spotted him again, same guy from Sayed. Still alone, same slouch, still scrolling through his phone like he was trying to escape it. When it was his turn to pay, the POS machine rejected his card. He tried again, and again. The vendor rolled her eyes, tapping her nails impatiently on the counter. People began to look. Without hesitation, Kamsi walked over, pulled out her own card, and slid it into the machine. Transaction approved. It blinked. He looked up, startled. Their eyes met for the first time. His were large, curious, and caught somewhere between gratitude and embarrassment. Thank you, he stammered. How can I repay you? She smiled, just a little. Don't worry about it, she said gently. Just eat. Then she turned and walked away, not knowing her life had just changed. The next afternoon, while Kamsi sat at her usual corner in the bustling mommy market, scrolling absent-mindedly through her phone as she waited for her meal, something unexpected happened. A tray landed gently in front of her. Jollof rice, grilled chicken, fried plantains, a bottle of malt, and cold water. She blinked, puzzled, and looked up. Standing before her was the same guy from the night before. His eyes darted nervously away from hers as he mumbled, "Just thought this was a proper way to say thank you." And then, like a breeze passing through, he turned and walked back to his solitary spot near the edge of the market. Kamsi stared at the tray, then back at him. He hadn't waited for a reaction. He hadn't expected her to join him. That intrigued her more than anything. Carefully, she picked up the tray, stood, and walked straight to his table. He looked up mid-bite, surprised, as she slid into the seat opposite him. "What's your name?" she asked, folding her arms. His lips parted slightly before he replied, "Elijah." There was hesitation in his voice, not because he was unsure of himself, but because he wasn't used to being approached, especially not by someone like her. "Kamsi," she offered. "But I guess you already know that." Their conversation started slow, awkward even. She asked basic questions, and he answered them with clipped honesty. But when he began to open up, his words took on a rhythm, like pages flipping softly in a worn novel. He told her he was an only child, raised by his mother after his father left when he was barely 3. His best friend had died in a car crash 2 years ago, an event that cracked his already quiet world into silence. "I guess books are easier than people," he said. "They don't expect you to explain yourself." Kamsi listened, really listened, in a way she hadn't done in a long time. She didn't feel the need to impress him or hide behind wit or beauty. Instead, she shared her own pain. Not everything, just fragments. Enough to build a bridge between them. "I thought I had it all figured out," she said, "until I realized I was just someone else's option." They didn't look at each other much during the conversation, but when they did, it felt like time paused, like something heavy was being exchanged without words. That evening became a routine. They'd meet after drills or during breaks, sharing meals and stolen conversations. Elijah started saving extra snacks from his daily allowance just to give her something when she skipped breakfast. Kamsi would wait under the almond tree beside the parade ground, already knowing he'd walk by. They started teasing each other, laughing more. The quietness between them no longer felt awkward, it felt earned. It was in that silence that something began to bloom, not rushed, not loud, but steady. One night, past lights out, Kamsi found herself standing in front of Elijah's door. She hadn't planned it, not really. She was in an oversized tee and slippers, arms folded, heart thudding. When he opened the door, his brows rose in surprise. "Kamsi? I wanted to see you," she said, her voice low. He stepped aside, wordlessly letting her in. His room was small, neat, his few belongings lined up precisely. A bottle of wine stood on the table, newly purchased from the mommy market. "I was going to drink alone," he said with a half-smile, "but this is better." They shared the wine from a single plastic cup, knees touching, voices soft. The night wrapped around them like a blanket. Her fingers brushed his as they passed the cup back and forth. Then, as she stood to leave, he caught her hand gently. "Kamsi," he whispered, eyes searching hers. "Can I kiss you?" She didn't answer. She simply leaned in, her lips meeting his in a kiss that started gentle but deepened quickly. He froze for a second, then melted into it. One kiss became 2, then 3. The air grew thick with heat and yearning. Their breath shortened, their hands wandered, her shirt slipped off her shoulder, his vest hit the floor. And when he finally entered her, it wasn't rushed. It was purposeful, intense. She gasped, arching toward him, her body moving in sync with his rhythm, each thrust unraveling something buried deep within her. Her moans were soft, urgent, sacred. When it was over, they lay breathless, tangled in each other. He kissed her shoulder, his breath warm against her skin. "I thought you were all gentle," she teased, half laughing, still panting. He chuckled, pulling the sheet over them. Later, he walked her back to her dorm quietly, hand in hand. She went to bed with her body still humming, a strange kind of peace settling over her. She had promised herself not to fall again. But Elijah didn't feel like a rebound. He felt like the beginning of something that might actually matter. The days that followed passed like pages in a book Kamsi didn't want to close. Every morning, she woke up with a new kind of energy. Not because NYSC camp had become any less exhausting, but because she knew Elijah would be somewhere nearby, waiting under the almond tree with a Zobo drink, saving her a seat at the market, pretending to complain about the heat just so he could hand her his handkerchief. They weren't loud, they weren't public, but what they had was real. Real enough that people started to notice. Her platoon girls whispered when she slipped away during breaks. His bunkmates teased him when he returned with a smile he couldn't hide. But they didn't care. They were building something in the shadows, slowly, deliberately, without expectations, just truth. One afternoon, after a tedious first aid training near the clinic, Elijah looked up from his notebook and said, "My mom is coming to pick me up on the last day of camp." Kamsi nodded absently, sipping her water. "She's been asking a lot of questions," he added. Then he looked straight at her, eyes serious. "I want her to meet you." She froze. The words hit differently. In Nigeria, meeting someone's mother wasn't casual. It was a declaration. "Are you sure?" she asked, trying to sound unfazed. He nodded slowly. "You matter to me, Kamsi. I want her to see who's been keeping me sane." She smiled at him, but something tugged at her chest. Later that night, as the sun dipped and shadows stretched long over the parade ground, Kamsi found herself pacing in front of the dorms, her thoughts swirling. She hadn't planned for any of this. Elijah wasn't part of her strategy to recover. He had just happened. And now he wanted her to meet his mother? That was real. That was a bridge into the future. That was risk. Still, when the final day came, she stood beside him at the camp gate, her khaki outfit perfectly pressed, lips glossed just enough, a knot forming in her stomach. The black SUV rolled up slowly, polished and quiet. Out stepped a well-dressed woman in a silk blouse, her jewelry understated but expensive. Her eyes scanned Kamsi in a single motion, and she offered a small smile. "You must be the one he talks about," she said. Then, as they leaned in for a brief hug, she whispered so softly it almost went unheard, "It should end here." Kamsi's breath hitched. She pulled back, expression blank, heart crashing like a broken dam. Elijah didn't hear. He was already loading his suitcase into the trunk. They hugged, longer than usual. "I'll call," he said. She smiled faintly. "I'll wait." But inside, something had collapsed. Back home, she lasted 2 days before the dam burst. Her father found her curled up on the living room couch, still in her nightgown, face buried in a pillow. He sat beside her without a word until she whispered, "I think I lost him." Her voice was small, like a child's. "His mom doesn't want me." She told him everything, about the camp, about Elijah, about the whisper at the gate. Her father listened, fingers steepled, face unreadable. When she finished, he didn't offer cliches or false hope. Instead, he stood and said, "Come to my study tomorrow morning." The next day, she walked into his office with swollen eyes and her heart in her hands. He reached into his desk drawer and handed her the key fob to his latest Bentley. "Go visit them," he said, "but wear your best dress. Not to prove anything, just to remind people who you are." She blinked at him, confused. He smiled softly. Sometimes people only respect what they see. That afternoon, Kamsi transformed. She wore a silk blouse tucked into tailored jeans, her makeup subtle but flawless, gold earrings glinting in the sun. Her heels clicked with confidence as she stepped out of the Bentley in front of Elijah's modest home. He didn't recognize her at first. "Kamsi?" he asked, stunned. "Hi, Elijah," she said, her voice warm but calm. His mother came out moments later, drawn by the sound of the engine. One look at the car, the driver, the quiet confidence of the young woman standing before her, and her expression shifted. "Good afternoon, Ma," Kamsi said respectfully. "I came to invite you and Elijah to dinner at my father's house tonight." There was a pause, then a nod. "We'll come," Elijah's mother said. Hours later, they arrived at the Okoye residence. The gates alone whispered wealth. Inside, marble floors gleamed, chandeliers sparkled, and the aroma of food prepared by a private chef danced through the air. Kamsi's father greeted them in person, a warm host with a familiar face, one often seen on magazine covers and political roundtables. Elijah stared in disbelief. "You had all this, and you never said a word?" he asked in a low voice. Kamsi took his hand and smiled gently. "I didn't want you to love me for any of this." He stared at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You might have just trapped my mom forever." They both laughed, but inside Elijah's mother, something had shifted too. And it showed in her eyes as she looked at Kamsi again, this time with something dangerously close to admiration. The following week felt like something out of a dream Elijah never expected to live. Everywhere he turned, people were talking, not just about Kamsi but about them. Her name was no longer whispered with envy or curiosity, but with a kind of reverence, like she'd crossed some unspoken threshold. And Elijah, once invisible in the shadows of the camp's social world, was now the man who'd won the heart of a girl no one thought they could touch. But none of that mattered to him. What stayed with him most wasn't the transformation of public opinion. It was the way Kamsi had looked at him that night, in her father's mansion. Like nothing else existed. Like the entire world could fall apart, and she'd still be standing there, choosing him. He couldn't stop thinking about it, about her, about how she moved through rooms like she was born for them, yet made the smallest places, like his modest room or the dusty trail behind the mommy market, feel like they belonged to her just the same. She never once acted superior, never once made him feel small. And now that he knew the full weight of her background, her legacy, her wealth, it only deepened his awe. She had it all. And still chose to pay for his meal that first night. Still chose him. His mother didn't stop talking about Kamsi either. Gone were the whispered warnings and polite coldness. Now it was full praise. Her poise, her upbringing, her way of speaking. "That girl," she said over dinner one evening, "is a rare gem. You'd be foolish not to hold on to her." Elijah didn't say much in response. He just smiled, letting his mind drift to things he never allowed himself to imagine before. Rings, a home, a lifetime. 2 days later, he called Kamsi and asked her to clear her Saturday. "Why?" she asked, half laughing. "Because I want to show you something," he said. That morning, he took her to a quiet, tucked-away art gallery in Lekki. It was nearly empty, except for a jazz musician playing softly in the corner and a single waiter who handed Kamsi a white rose the moment she stepped in. She gave Elijah a questioning look. "What is all this?" she asked, clutching his arm. "Just walk with me," he replied, his voice softer than usual. They moved through the gallery slowly, pausing in front of paintings and sculptures, Kamsi's fingers brushing his now and then. At the end of the hallway stood a large canvas, covered in rich velvet. Elijah gave a subtle nod, and the cloth was pulled down. What emerged was a stunning painting of her, Kamsi, in her NYSC uniform, carrying a tray of snacks through the mommy market. Her smile in the painting was radiant, soft, real. She gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. And when she turned, Elijah was already on one knee. "Kamsi Okoye," he began, his voice shaking, "you walked into my life when I was invisible. You didn't care about the noise, the background, the lack of everything. You saw me, and when I found out who you really were, you still stayed the same. I've never known love like this. Honest, quiet, strong. I don't want to go another day without being yours in every way. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes before she could speak. She nodded once, then again, and whispered, "Yes, yes." Elijah slipped the ring onto her finger, and the jazz melted into a romantic tune as the lights dimmed just slightly. They danced there, in the middle of the gallery, like nothing else existed. From that moment, things moved quickly. Her family wanted something elegant, tasteful, intimate. His wanted something traditional, festive, grand. They chose both. A Yoruba traditional engagement in Abeokuta and a white wedding in Abuja. Invitations went out. Designers were hired. Aso Ebi colors were chosen. Their pre-wedding shoot in Paris made waves online. Kamsi in a sweeping red gown, Elijah in a classic black tux, both glowing like they'd been born into that kind of magic. Then came the unexpected blessing. Elijah's father, a retired contractor who had registered a corporate business in his name for tax purposes, received final approval on a long-delayed international construction deal. The morning after their engagement went public, a notification buzzed on Elijah's phone. Transfer received, $850,000. His breath caught. He called his father immediately. "What is this?" he asked. His father chuckled. "It's yours. You signed the paperwork last year. Time to become a man. Start your future." Elijah didn't waste a second. He drove straight to Kamsi's house, found her in the garden, and spun her into the air. "We're getting the wedding of your dreams," he whispered breathlessly. "No," she grinned, holding his face. "The wedding of our dreams." And in that moment, neither of them had any doubt. They were exactly where they were meant to be. The months leading up to the wedding unfolded like scenes from a fairy tale dipped in reality. Kamsi and Elijah found themselves swept into a world of fittings, tastings, travel, and quiet moments that somehow still felt like stolen time. They bought a modern duplex in Lekki Phase 1, a 2-story haven with a private cinema, a sunlit backyard, and closets large enough to hold all of Kamsi's dreams. True to her nature, she insisted on paying for half, and Elijah didn't argue. She wasn't looking to be taken care of. She wanted to build something with him, not be handed anything. That was the rhythm of their love, balanced, intentional, steady. They flew to Dubai to pick out their wedding rings, laughing over croissants in an airport lounge and stealing kisses on the elevator ride to the jeweler. Then to Paris for their pre-wedding shoot, where Kamsi stood in the middle of the Louvre in a flowing white dress, her hair catching the breeze, Elijah holding her hand like he never planned to let go. The photos flooded social media. Friends, strangers, even celebrities reposted them with captions like "Love Still Lives" and "From NYSC Camp to Forever." Their story became something people told each other late at night, smiling at their screens. But for Kamsi and Elijah, it wasn't about the cameras or the applause. It was the quiet moments that meant the most. The way he kissed her forehead before bed. The way she ran her fingers through his hair while he worked late into the night reviewing contract documents. The way they fit together in silence without needing to speak. They weren't perfect, but they were present, and that made everything sacred. When their traditional engagement finally arrived in Abeokuta, the air was thick with celebration. Drummers lined the compound, the scent of jollof and fried goat meat swirling into the crowd of guests dressed in matching aso ebi. Elijah, in a wine-colored agbada, looked like royalty, but his eyes never left Kamsi. She walked into the courtyard surrounded by her sisters and cousins, her lace iro and buba shimmering in the sunlight, coral beads resting proudly on her neck. The crowd went still. Even the elders exchanged approving glances. She greeted his parents on her knees, then rose gracefully, lifting her chin toward him. Elijah's mother held her hand tightly afterward and whispered, "You were born to lead beside him." The church wedding followed a week later, held at a cathedral in the heart of Abuja. The guest list read like a who's who of Nigerian high society, politicians, CEOs, foreign diplomats. But Elijah saw none of them. He stood at the altar in a crisp white tuxedo, his heart racing so hard he could feel it in his fingertips. Then the music shifted, and everything else disappeared. Kamsi appeared at the far end of the aisle in a gown fit for a queen. Long lace sleeves, a cascading veil, delicate diamond earrings that caught the stained glass light. But it wasn't the dress. It was her smile, steady and soft, the way her eyes locked on his like they already knew every vow by heart. As she reached him, he leaned in and whispered, "You look like sin and salvation wrapped in one." She giggled, swatting his arm gently. "You better say your vows right." And he did. So did she. Their voices didn't shake. They didn't cry until the kiss. When the officiant said, "You may now kiss the bride," Elijah pulled her in like they were still under the stars behind the NYSC clinic, whispering secrets between breaths. The church erupted in applause, but all they heard was each other. The reception was something out of a Nollywood epic. A horse-drawn carriage carried them into the venue. Fireworks cracked open the sky, and Banky W performed live as the couple danced like they were alone. Kamsi's father gave a toast that made half the room tear up. Elijah's mother watched them closely, smiling like she had always believed in this love. As the final song played and guests began to gather their things, Kamsi turned to Elijah and whispered, "Remember what your mom said to me after camp?" He raised a brow. She leaned closer. "It should end here," she said with a smirk. Elijah laughed, full and deep. Well, she wasn't wrong, he replied, pulling her closer as their champagne glasses clinked. Because this is just the beginning. And under the soft lights, surrounded by family, friends, and the echoes of a love story that had surprised them all, Kamsi and Elijah danced their way into forever. Life lesson from Kamsi and Elijah's story. In a world where appearances often dictate worth, Kamsi and Elijah's love story reminds us of the quiet power of authenticity. It's easy to be drawn to glamour, wealth, or status, but true connection happens when we dare to see and be seen for who we really are. Kamsi had every reason to shield herself after heartbreak, to protect her pride and retreat into comfort, but instead, she chose vulnerability. Elijah, soft-spoken and often overlooked, proved that strength doesn't always shout, it often whispers in consistency, kindness, and quiet loyalty. Their journey teaches us that love isn't built on perfection, nor does it thrive in facades. It flourishes in shared meals, honest conversations, and acts of unspoken support. And while society might judge by surface, the heart knows what it needs. Kamsi didn't fall for a man's bank account, she fell for his soul. And Elijah didn't love her title, he loved the way she saw him when no one else did. Above all, their story shows us that real love doesn't ask us to shrink or pretend. It invites us to grow, to rise, and to love boldly in the face of doubt. Where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you. And if this story moved you even a little, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more inspiring tales like this. Your next favorite story is just a click away.